Welcome to Tightlining Maryland. Today what we're going to do is we're going to try to present Euro nymphing in the easiest, or what we could say is the simplest way. So if you watch this video today, what you're going to learn from it is you're going to hear a one-stop shop for just about everything. What would I do in terms of picking a rod and reel? What would I do in terms of making a leader that's simplistic? And what can I do in terms of like tippet selection and flies? So that way when you get out and you fish a run like we're about to, you'll find that it's a much more streamlined process. I'm a local Maryland guide. I offer guide trips. I take people out for clinics and schools. I do a variety of different things on the water. And one of the most common things I run into is that people sometimes, and I totally get this, that with fly fishing, it can kind of go over your head. We can get inundated with information, and there's just so many choices out there. Do you want to fish a mono rig? Do you want to fish a thin leader or a thick leader? Do you want to taper it? You know, what rod and reel do I want to pair together? Again, there's so many things that go into this sport, and my goal, having guided many different people of all walks of experience, whether it's new to fly fishing, new to Euro nymphing, or 20, 30 years of experience and plenty of it Euro nymphing, I'm just trying to, with this video, make it a lot more easy or simplistic for you. So let's walk you through some of the terminal stuff before we get out and fish some of the water behind us. All right, so when it comes to rod and reel selection, what we need to think about in the most easy of ways is you want something with length. I'll give you an example. When I first started Euro nymphing and the person introduced me to this, ironically on the very rod that I'm using here today, I didn't have the money or the availability to buy a new rod, although I had fell in love with Euro nymphing. What had happened is I went out and I got to experience it on somebody else's rod, and I ended up having a great day. It was the best day I've ever had on the water, and I just was immediately enamored with Euro nymphing. And I think many people, that's usually what ends up happening. But the reality is that, like, again, I had just bought an 8'6", I believe it was a 4-weight Recon, so I was not in the market to buy another rod. And if you're not, by all means, don't do that. I think you can get by with a traditional 9-foot, or even as I did, 8'6". It is not ideal. I want to make sure you understand that it's not the best tool for the job. But if you have to, you can absolutely make it work. So what would I suggest? What I would tell you is if you're just getting into it, you do have the ability to get a rod, which I'm gonna, by the way, before I even get into all that, I'm gonna link all of the things that I think about when it comes into selection of things. I have a one-stop shop document that I've created for you all. And if you look down in the description, you're going to find that link that basically tells you what would be an intermediate rod, what would be a beginner rod, what would be the higher end rod. It is not an end all be all. There are so many good rod and reel selections out there, but I was trying to trim it down to a place where you could find it all at Precision Fly, a company that, a fly shop that is, that I work with. They offer a discount to people, and I want to be able to give that back to you. That way, whenever you go out and try this on the river, you'll be getting a rod and reel that I trust, but also you'll be getting a discount on that. So check out that the link that I've provided down in the bottom, and you're going to see how I break down the different rods that I own from, you know, the highest tippy top point of the price range to down to the bottom when you first get started, and you should absolutely work your way up to those things. But let's talk about what we have today. What we have today is the rod that I kind of christened with Euro nymphing, and I think it stood the test of time. This is a Syndicate 10-foot 3-weight pipeline. It's a P2 pipeline. I really believe that this is one of the best rods for somebody to start with, because what's going to happen is this does not break the bank. It runs about 350 to 375 if I'm not mistaken. And at the end of the day, when you're just getting started, you don't want to spend too much on gear. But what I love about it is I have the length that I need, because if you're looking for a one-stop shop answer to a rod, I think a 10-foot rod is pretty much the best you know, length to work with. You can go to 10.6, you can go to 11 feet. I've seen them even 11.3. I own one. But at the end of the day, when you're Euro nymphing, I think 10 foot is probably a good starting point for just about anybody. The reason why I like the 3-weight is that's in between. What I mean by that is it's a good jack of all trades. I can nymph with this rod very successfully. I can do a dry dropper with this, and I can also streamer fish with this. If I got too light and went to 1 or 2 weight, or if I got too heavy, up to the 4, 5, and 6 weights. At that point, I'm losing a little bit every time I make a change. So a 10-foot 3-weight is the perfect middle ground, and I really do love this P2 pipeline. Next, when it comes to reel selection, the reel, you want to keep it very basic. Really what it is a glorified line holder, and it's good for your leader. At the end of the day, yes, you probably want a full cage reel so your leader doesn't slip. If you've been Euro nymphing before, you've maybe had that where it gets caught in the reel or possibly slips out. This is not the one I'm using today, a full cage reel, but those also are at the top range of the price point. So what I've got on here is a Lamson Liquid. It's a 4, 5-weight reel. I really like that as, again, a middle point price range that's going to have good drag. It's going to have, you know, the large arbor that you need to help balance it. At the end of the day, what you're looking for is if I put my finger on that cork, I don't want it to be too tip heavy and I don't want it to be too reel heavy. If I do that and I have it too tip or reel heavy, I'm going to induce either forearm or shoulder fatigue, especially if I end up fishing with my arm out, which again, that's a misconception of Euro nymphing. But at the end of the day, we want something that balances. I don't put many fish on the reel, and as far as full cage goes, I haven't had a ton of slippage with this reel. So bang for the buck, I've been able to beat these two over 10 years of experience. I'm telling you. These two paired together, I have been able to beat it to hell and back, and it stood the test of time. So if you're looking to get into Euro nymphing, you like what you see today when we get out on the stream, and you want to try for yourself, I can't emphasize enough, I think this is a great midpoint that's not going to bust your budget, and it'll get you out on the water using the tools you need. Next, let's talk about streamlining a leader. When it comes to the leader, I really want to keep it as simplistic as possible. There are so many different configurations out there for Euro nymphing and your leaders, and they're all great depending upon what you're trying to do. So I'm, again, trying to give you a streamlined rod and reel combo as well as a leader setup to make it very easy. So that way, as soon as you put it together and go to the stream, you can do a little bit of everything well. And what I mean by that is, again, nymphing, dry dropper, streamers. So here are the materials we use. The first one that we're going to utilize here is going to be Maxima Chameleon. It's in a 10-pound spool. This is their large one. This one has, what is this one? 220 yards. So I can build a lifetime worth of leaders. I do sell leaders on my website as well as the flies we're going to use. So if you don't want to go out and necessarily buy all the stuff for yourself yet, and you just want to kind of experiment, I do offer those things, whether it's flies and leaders, but at the end of the day, if you're looking to make your own, because you should take pride in what you do on your own, this 10-pound Maxima Chameleon that's in brown, they do sell it in a green version, but I do like this kind of reddish brown. This particular chameleon, I love it, and I build it very long. So what I do, and I already have mine assembled, but I basically take about 35 to 40 feet. Yes, you heard it here, very long, because again, if I want to cast a streamer, I need the length. If I want to do dry dropper, I want to make sure I can reach if I need to. We're usually not bombing many casts more than 20 feet. There are exceptions to every rule, but at the end of the day, I don't want my leader to come off of my reel. So I make it long enough to go out the guides in terms of on the rod, and then long enough for a drift, and that's usually 10 or 15 feet excess. So I make them about 35 to 40 feet. That way everything stays on the reel. So this is your first piece, and put yourself about 35 to 40 feet on if you're looking for a number to start. Let's get out the next material. The next material you're going to want is Tippet rings. These are from Fulling Mill. You can buy whatever brand you want. I do think the Maxima Chameleon matters because it's very, very low in terms of memory. So as a result, I don't get many coils. I can usually straighten it out pretty quickly, and it's a very good material. But when it comes to Tippet rings, what I would tell you is get whatever you're comfortable with. They usually come in packages of 10 on a little clasp. But this is from Fulling Mill. The one thing I'll tell you is keep it thin. Some Euro nymphing anglers use no Tippet rings, and I have no problem with that, and I believe that it works very, very well. But for many, it's the easiest and simplest way, especially if you get broken off on a tree or a rock or something that's below the surface, or even, God forbid, up in the trees. But these Fulling Mill Tippet rings are 2.0, and I want them to be very small in diameter. So 2.0 millimeter, I'm going to connect that to my first 35 feet of this leader. So it goes Maxima Chameleon 35 to 40 feet, and then a Tippet ring. The next thing we're going to do after we add a Tippet ring is we're going to put in about 2 to 3 feet of cider material. This is the most important part of your day, and it's going to dictate to you everything you need to know, hence the term cider. It's going to dictate everything you need to know about what's going on below the surface, because I understand it can be very intimidating and you don't really know what's going on. What I would advocate for is the Rio two-tone. I really like that it comes in a, you'll see it right here, I'll zoom in on it for you and make sure that you can see it, bring it up to the camera, and if I can, I'll even zoom in on the computer. But at the end of the day, I really like that it's got a chartreuse and magenta. It tapers, I shouldn't say it tapers, excuse me, it varies in color, and it'll go from one to the other all the way through. If you're looking for which one to buy, I carry a bunch of different ones for a variety of reasons, but I would suggest a 2X. Get the 2X because it's going to be thick enough that you're going to be able to see it fairly easily, and it'll also match in terms of the size of your leader, so that way it's not too thick or too thin. So about 2 to 3 feet off of your tippet ring that you've added of that 2X. And the last thing that you're going to do once you've added in your cider material is you're going to put in one more tippet ring. So the leader build is very simple. Again, the goal is to be streamlined. Get yourself 35 to 40 feet of the Maxima Chameleon in 10 pound. You could even go 12, but 10's probably good. Then what we'll do is we'll add one tippet ring, 2 millimeter of whatever brand you like. We're going to add in 2 to 3 feet of our cider. I would tell you probably 3 is best. 3 feet of our Rio two-tone. I do prefer that brand and how it looks, and it's easy for me to see, but put that 2X on there about 3 feet and add one more tippet ring, and that's going to be your terminal end of your leader. So now I can kind of show you, since we've walked through, you know, what goes into this leader build, now I can kind of show you what it looks like in practice once you get it on your rod. So again, my leader is built up very long. It's all sitting on this Lamson liquid reel. It's out all of my guides. And then the thing that I'm watching all day today, albeit this one has changed colors a little bit, the magenta and yellow have kind of mottled a little bit, but that's all right, I can still see it. But really what I'm doing is watching my cider. What'll happen is you're gonna see it out on the stream. This cider will usually have a little bit of a sag in it, and if a fish eats, it's gonna straighten up. Once you have your cider on there with your last tippet ring, all you need to do is add tippet. I primarily, about 90% of the time, if I'm just looking to quantify it, about 90% of the time I put on 6X tippet. I do prefer 100-yard spools if you can find them, 100-yard spools of the Umpqua Deceiver X. But at the end of the day, any tippet that's 6X fluorocarbon is going to be fine. With fluorocarbon, it's more abrasion resistant, and we're fishing subsurface, so we're ticking rocks and logs and just things that are down there, and inevitably you don't want it to kind of like nick or fray your line and make it damaged, so that way it loses some of its strength and durability. So when it comes to tippet, I usually fish 6X, especially when I'm going to nymph, even when I know that there's going to be, you know, average to above average fish in there. The stream that we're fishing today, these are usually on average only 9 to 12 inch fish, and some obviously very small and others big, but 9 or 10 inches is the average. 6X is perfect for me. It's got a great sink rate, so it's going to get down fast. In terms of how much to put on, the water we're going to fish today that I see behind us, that is running about 2 feet deep. So what that tells me is I'm going to get a piece of about 2 feet of tippet, and I'm going to take that, actually I'll get about 3 feet to be honest, because when I add in my tippet, I'm going to tie it into my tippet ring, and that first 3 feet, if I wanted to fish a 2-foot run with one fly, you can do that. But for today, we're going to fish 2 flies, so I have on about 2 feet, 2.5, somewhere in that range, and I overlap and add in a double surgeon's knot. What that allows me to do, so that way you can see it, is I'm fishing a tag system where I have one more mid column and then I have one on the bottom. So in essence, I put one down low and one in the middle. The reason why I do that is because I like to figure out if the fish are hugged to the bottom or if they're eating emergers. Today, what I have on is I have on a thread Frenchie in a size 14, and I have on a what I call a sulfurish pheasant tail. So that particular fly is just a pheasant tail with a little bit of yellow dubbing, and then my thread Frenchie that I have on here is again trying to imitate the bugs that are down on the bottom. These are both size 14s. You can absolutely go 14 on the bottom, 16 on the top, 14 on the top, 16 on the bottom. They do different things, and I'm not going to get into the nuance of that because the goal of this is to be streamlined. But what I would tell you is your goal is to fish 1.5 the depth of tippet. So what that means is if the water is about 2 feet deep, I want on about 3 feet of tippet to my first fly, and if I'm fishing a single fly, I want about 3 or 4 feet, because again, there's going to be a little bit of induced sag, so they're not going to be straight down to the bottom. since I'm fishing 2 with that double surgeons, I only needed about 2 to 2.5 feet to my first fly. And when I added in my other section of about 18 to 24 inches of extra length, now I have that 3 to 3.5 feet of total depth. So let's get out in the water. We've talked enough about theory, and I think it's time to show you how effectively you can pick apart water and fish broken water, moving water, and ultimately put some fish in the basket. So let's get out there and show you how this works. But what we're gonna do for this video is I'm only gonna fish a couple different runs. I'm gonna fish this about 30 to 50 yard stretch of water, and then maybe I'll hit one more up here. I don't think you need to cover a ton of water to have success. You really just wanna look for broken water. So I have water that's moving all throughout here. I've got a rock up here. I've got another one over there, another one up there. All of this is holding fish. The water is up, it's got a small stain on it. We're in the perfect time of year where I've got sulfurs and some caddis coming off. That's why I'm using that kind of sulfur-ish pheasant tail. And if I can get clean drifts through some of these lanes and channels, I truly believe that you could absolutely catch 3 to 5 fish in this section and catch another 3 to 5 down there. Before I even started, I was fishing this and was able to pick up a few right along the log. So we're gonna fish above that. Really, when we're thinking about what to fish with Euro nymphing, this is right at shin deep. This is perfect depth for Euro nymphing. What you're looking for is roughly ankle to knee deep. That is your best and that is your sweet spot for nymphing. Anything from ankle to knee deep. And at the end of the day, if you can get it shin deep, you're in the sweet spot of what you're looking for. So what I do, because there's no mast to really roll this, if I sit here with all my flies right in front of me and a little bit of leader off, I can't turn over my lines. So as a result, what I'll do is I'll grab with my offhand, because I'm left-handed, I know that makes me weird, but I'll grab my leader to get tension, pull those flies, and then I'll just do a little flick and kind of shoot them downstream with a false cast. That's a really important point because I know it can be something where you fumble around with your leader and it can be foreign and difficult, but all you need in terms of length, and I can kind of do this just by this exact example, I can take about the rod length's worth of line out the guides and put my flies right about where my reel is, and that's all I need. Most of Euro nymphing, you're making casts and you're catching fish very close to yourself. So in this particular run, all I need is, again, just a little bit out the guides, and I don't need any more. That's the simple way of doing it. How would I cast and how would I hold and control the line? To again, streamline this and make it very easy, I would take your line and pinch it down. I would do that with your trigger finger, which is what I use for my middle. I like to grab my rod with my index finger on the cork. And the reason why I like that is one thing I see taking guide trips is people will use their thumb and they have a tendency of like breaking and rolling their wrist. I'll demonstrate that. They go like this and roll it over. We are not out here chucking and ducking. We're not out here lobbing and kerplunking our setup. So in order to have better casting, I like to put my index finger there and I'll tuck the mono or the leader underneath of my trigger finger. So I'm gonna set everything up downstream, okay, that little flick. We're gonna tuck it underneath of our finger. What we're gonna do is use the tension of the water to water haul this or water load it. A key thing about your cast when you're first starting out is I think you want to do the metronome of traditional fly fishing. Put it at 10 and 2, or in this case, 2 and 10. So I'm gonna start with my rod tip not to the sky and not to the water. I'm gonna put it so that it's right on the horizon, and I'm gonna put it at 2 o'clock, okay, still at the horizon. And then we're gonna look forward. We're gonna take our index finger and point towards the target, flick to 10, stop. And when you finish at 10 o'clock, you engage. There we go. So you gotta love a fish on the first cast. Let's get this fish in. One thing I'll say about fighting fish is always keep a little bit of a C in your rod. Keep them down, don't let the head come up until you're ready to net them. So now that we are, we'll slide them over and into the net. A nice wild brown to start our day on the thread Frenchie. First cast fish, you always love to see that. A nice, again, average 9-10 inch fish, and there he goes. So again, I want to reiterate our key points. What we were doing there is, again, taking the tension of grabbing our line because there's no mass. So there's no mass to these leaders. So you're going to grab your line, you're going to almost false cast it and flick it downstream. Remember, all you need is about a rod's length of line out. You don't need any more. You're going to pinch it down, put it underneath your trigger finger. Going to put that index finger on your cork. Not to the sky, not to the water. We're going to put it at 10 o'clock. We're going to flick to 2, do a small lift right before the flies enter, and then get that sighter pretty straight and bring it down the stream. One thing to think about whenever you're considering your drift from 2 to 10, lift before they hit. That gets you tight and engaged. As you're bringing your leader and your sighter, there's another one. As you're bringing your leader and your sighter down the stream, try to keep it at or slightly slower than the pace of the current. Your goal is to really let the flies do the work with the water. So again, just go at or slightly slower than the pace of the current. Let's see what this guy took. I think he took our tag fly up. So we got that sulfurish nymph. So we've got fish eating on the bottom. We got fish eating towards the top. But when you go at or slower than the pace of the current, what you're doing is you're allowing those fish to see your bugs in real time, and you're not kind of forcing the issue. I mean, this is 2 fish in short order, just in a little run right here that they should be stacked up in, and sure enough they are. But what we were doing and doing well is when we start at 2, we finish at 10, we lift right before the flies enter, and then we get that sighter vertical. We don't want, there's another one. We don't necessarily want to keep it 100% vertical. I think that one of the things that I see is a fired up little brown. And he took that sulfurish nymph. As mentioned, if you want any of these flies, I keep them on the website, and you're welcome to use them and see if you can put some wild browns in your basket on your streams close to where you are. But thank you, Mr. Brown. But when it comes to your drift, what I'm trying to get at is you need to engage your sighter. What I'm seeing is, and this is a huge misconception with a lot of the people I take out, but I fish with a lot of really great people and anglers, and they know exactly what I'm talking about too. But when you don't know what you don't know, and when people come out to the stream, they think, and this is what they say to me, they're like, well, you feel all your takes, right? And it's like, no, I actually feel probably less than half of, if not closer to, I feel maybe 25 to 40% at most of my eats. What we're looking for is when we engage that sighter and we get it somewhat vertical and we're going at or slightly slower than the pace of the current, what we're looking for is any hesitation, pause, anything at all that kind of stops the natural flow of our leader as it comes down the stream. So we're going to make our cast, we flick, stop, and lift. And as we engage that sighter, I'm waiting for it to do anything unnatural. I'm even sinking it a little bit as it comes down, but the irregularity and the unnatural changes in that leader dictate to me and tell me that something has eaten, something has happened below the surface, and that's why we call it sighter. It's a very visual cue, and it does all the work for you. It takes the guessing game out of, what's going on. We don't need an indicator. The indicator is the sighter. And if you can go slightly slower or just in line with the current, you're going to catch a lot of fish. But what I see most often is people will not stop the rod high to be able to lift and engage that sighter. There's a fish he ate instantly, and I'm okay that he came off because I fought him incorrectly. But what you just saw is when I tuck that cast, and it is a tuck cast. I'm going to do that again. When I tuck that and do a lift and engage that, that fish ate instantly as soon as those flies hit. So we went from 2 to 10 with a small lift. As soon as those bugs hit, it was boom, just like a freight train. It hit it. That one I did feel, but at the end of the day, that's because I had immediate contact in a heavy riffle. So if you do that, you're going to catch a lot of fish very quickly, and it's not always on the front half of your drift. I mean, most of the fish I catch are from even with me and up. And if I'm really doing my job well, most of my fish are going to come in the, let's call this a half. and then this will be my back half. In my first half of my drift, most of my fish should come in that first quadrant or quarter, and then the other amount will typically come in the middle. This is the slightly easier to pick off and control, where I see a lot of anglers catching most of their fish. But as soon as you start catching and hooking fish in the front part of your drift, that's when you know you've kind of hit the next level. So we're gonna slide back out. We're gonna fish the inside seam and then the middle. And we're gonna work out and up. So one thing about how I approach water is I usually work from inside to out, and I work straight across, then back out, and I move up. So as I'm trying to work upstream, I've come back, I'm gonna slide up, and we're gonna kind of work these quadrants little by little. What we're looking for is anything at all that has good depth. Again, probably shin to knee deep. Anything that has good color, it kind of breaks the availability to see what's going on down there. If these fish can blend in and they're hard to be seen, then I think that usually that's where they're gonna be. So this river that I'm fishing today has a nice tinge to it. It's a little greenish brown, and as a result, these fish can really spread out and get all throughout these riffles and feel super comfortable with it. So let's get it water loaded, a little flick, small lift, engage that sighter, bring it down, look for your irregularity. If you're lucky, you'll feel it, but most importantly, watch it and you should see it. So that one almost hesitated, I almost set, but I paused. That is one thing I would caution you to not do. One of the things I see is the dreaded check set. So somebody will make a cast, they think they have a fish, and they'll just kind of like lift their, there was one. I was demonstrating bad habits and ended up hooking a fish. But one thing I'll see is they'll just lift their rod tip almost as if like, I just want to check to see if a fish is on there. And that particular one, he was. But that's a good way to lose fish, because whenever you're check setting and you're just inducing that little lift, unfortunately the fish is going to feel that. They usually spit the hook. And even if they don't, you didn't get a good hook set. Your hook set should clear your back shoulder. So as we get out here and we make these casts, I'm waiting to hook set, but I'm doing it in a fashion where, again, my leader and my flies are going to clear my right shoulder. We are not just going to do the dreaded check set where you just lift up ever so slightly. That's going to result in a bunch of lost fish and a lot of heartbreak. So we got hung up on the bottom. Usually it'll pop off if you just slide upstream of it. So we're going to do exactly that. There we go. Thread Frenchie for the win. We've had a nice mix of fish on the bottom and fish on the tag fly. And I think that that's an important component, because you want to be able to see what fly do they want, and do they want it low or high or more mid column. So we're going to get this little guy off. Barbless hooks, they usually pop right off. We're going to straighten out our tag fly because it's getting a little wonky. And we're right back in business. So here we go. Good core principles of, again, tucking it underneath of our trigger finger, getting it from 2 to 10, small lift right beforehand, stay in contact, wait for your sighter to do something irregular, unnatural, and typically you're going to catch some fish. It's never a guarantee. It all matters about your presentation, the fish density, conditions, all those good things. But whenever it comes together and you've got a good window, you've got good conditions, you've got the right flies and approach, a lot of times you can catch a lot of fish if you just have it dialed in. So let's finish this run out. We're just working up a little bit upstream and across. The water is kind of thinning itself out as we go up. We're actually going to swing our flies a little bit. Earlier I had saw a fish rise, and I want to know if they're willing to eat something on the swing. So when I do that, I usually end my drift right about here. But now what I'll do is, in order to swing it, I just make my casts. I let it get down of my rod tip, and then I keep that sighter elevated, and I'll start to drop my rod tip as those flies swing. And sometimes you pick up some extra fish that way, instead of just a traditional cast where usually you finish your drift right around your back foot. All right, we're gonna move up. So one thing we don't want is we don't want to just be ticking the bottom, tick, 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 over and over again. It's okay to, you know, feel it occasionally. It's okay to strike the bottom and hit it occasionally, but what you don't want is you don't want to be on the bottom the whole time, every drift. Otherwise, you need to change your weight. So I mentioned when we first started the video, I was using size 14s for both. If I was ticking the bottom too much, I would probably size them down and get away from my 2.2 millimeter bead size 14s. And I could either go to a single fly or change one of them to a 2/8 size 16. But primarily most of the flies, let's get you back, Mr. Brown. Most of the flies I fish are usually in the size 14 to 16 range. I think that if you stock your arsenal with size 14 through 18, and in particular 14 through 16, you can do a lot of damage fishing one or even two flies in conjunction with each other. But yeah, occasionally tick the bottom. Don't be too heavy, because otherwise you're not going to be able to let the fish see your fly. Find that happy medium, so that way occasionally you tick the bottom and most of the time you don't. And if you can get a sweet spot of in between the two, then that's where you end up catching a lot of fish. All right, let's cast over a little bit to the far bank. One thing about your cast is I don't usually cast too far across the stream, because it gets really hard to guide your flies down the same line of current. And what you're doing is you're inducing some level of drag. So more often than not, most of my casts are about 2 rod lengths up. So this is 1 plus the additional line out, that makes it 2, and 1 rod length across. So I wouldn't be able to cast to the bank without inducing, again, some level of drag in my drift. So more often than not, we cast right underneath of our rod tip, and that allows us to be able to control the drift and basically bring those flies in one lane of current downstream and back to us. So watch for casting, again, too far across the stream. That'll be problematic for you. I'm actually gonna just swing these bugs downstream, see if anything eats. There he is. Oh man, I saw a fish rise back there. He'll probably be the one that I end on. That's not really per se Euro nymphing, but I will say that sometimes I'll fish some flies with some hackle, and these particular ones don't have that. But if I fish something with hackle and I swing it on the backside of my drift, that can really work out to your advantage of getting fish that are eating emergers and looking on the surface or close to it. So the key for that fish was just get it down there, let it sit in his face, and do a small little rod tip lift. So there he goes. That's gonna wrap it up for Tightlining Maryland. I feel like this was a successful video for you. I think you got to see the power of what can be Euro nymphing when you have good conditions, good flows, good technique. I really hope that I was able to make it as easy for you as possible. Remember, again, down in the bottom of this video, there is a link to all the things that I use, whether it's flies, leaders, as well as just materials, and you can get a discount by using the document that I have supplied there through Precision Fly. But most importantly, get out on the water, chase down some wild fish or even stockfish, and just have fun. Utilize this technique when you go out, and leave a comment if you learned something or something new, even if you're an experienced angler. And when you do go out, let me know how it goes. So tight lines, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video.